Russian President Vladimir Putin issues his first statement since the Wagner rebellion. Kyriakos Mitsotakis promises major reforms after winning a second term as Greece's Prime Minister. The largest Hajj pilgrimage in history gets underway in Saudi Arabia. And parents anxious as a childcare subsidy increase gets eaten up by rising costs. I'm Lin Evlin. This is SBS World News. Good evening. The fallout from the extraordinary events in Russia over the weekend is still being measured and keenly watched in Western capitals. The US says the armed rebellion led by Wagner boss Yevgeny Prigozhin has revealed cracks in Vladimir Putin's authority. Tonight from Moscow, the first public reactions from within the Kremlin are emerging. Russian Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin fronting the cameras, making an appeal for national unity.
We need to act together as one team and maintain the unity of all forces, rallying around the president.
The Kremlin later releasing the first images of President Putin since the aborted mutiny, a video message to a gathering of young engineers. The leader is yet to comment on the deal made to quell the uprising. Meanwhile, Ukraine says it has liberated the southeastern village of Rivnepil, pressing forward with its counteroffensive.
It, of course, did not stop the conflict. Ukraine's 3rd Assault Brigade in action near Bakhmut. Its commander says this footage shows a successful advance on Russian positions filmed on the same day the leader of the Wagner group attempted his advance on Moscow. Moscow currently blessed with fine weather. The forecast for the Kremlin leader unsettled, according to an opposition figure.
He had to ask for help from Belarus dictator Lukashenko to get Prigozhin out of the country and make Wagner group retreat. That's a #1 humiliation for Putin across the history of his rule.
Not just embarrassing.
It's still a moving picture, and I doubt we've seen the last act. But I think we can say this much. First, we've seen some very serious cracks emerge.
The Kremlin just releasing these images of its Defence Minister Shoigu, the first time he's been seen since Wagner's boss demanded his ouster. The pictures without sound, but the intended message of government stability clear. Yevgeny Prigozhin grinning as he left Rostov-on-Don. The criminal case against him dropped as he agreed to exile in Belarus. But a smile that could evaporate soon.
If I was Mr. Prigozhin, I would invest in some really good security guards like others that have opposed Mr. Putin. He'll either take a nosedive off the 3rd floor balcony or he'll get a polonium headache and be gone.
Gone from Rostov, the last of the Wagner mercenaries, the city of 1 million, which hosts the headquarters of Russia's southern military district, hardly at ease.
It was unexpected and somehow incomprehensible and stressful, of course, very stressful.
There are very serious problems in the country and they need to be solved. People who can no longer tolerate it, they resort to such radical methods as Prigozhin.
Should Putin go after his former caterer and ally, expect another chapter in this drama, says a former NATO ambassador.
If that happens, and there is an attempt to go after Prigozhin, Prigozhin will publicize that and use that as justification for why he should be pushing back again and the military should join him in getting rid of Putin. I think that is the direction that this is likely to take over the next week or so.
The sun rises over the unknown in Moscow. It was Lenin who wrote in 1917, "There are decades when nothing happens, and there are weeks where decades happen." Or perhaps, in this case, less than 36 hours. Pruluwan, SBS World News.
Australia has committed another $110 million to Ukraine's war effort. It includes 70 armed vehicles, money for ammunition and humanitarian aid. The government says the commitment has been in the works for weeks and is not related to the weekend's events.
A symbol of Australia's support for Ukraine. Now to gain extra firepower.
An additional $110 million, bringing our total contribution to $790 million.
A similar-sized contribution last made in October, with Ukraine's Defence Ministry taking to social media earlier this month to plead for more supplies. Today's package including 70 extra vehicles, 28 of them M113 armoured personnel carriers.
This has taken too long and is too little in terms of what's being provided to Ukraine.
Nevertheless, support that's welcome on the Ukrainian front line. But other items atop Ukraine's wish list remain unfulfilled.
Bushmasters have performed really well, and Bushmasters are, and as well as Hawkeyes are made by the same company. And I hope that Australia will be able to consider sending other items from our request list.
Making this commitment.
We will stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes for Ukraine to resolve this conflict on their terms.
Russia dealt another blow on Australian soil as it lost a last-ditch attempt to hold on to land intended for its new embassy. Parliament passed legislation 10 days ago to terminate that lease over national security concerns. The High Court today upholding that decision and dismissing Russia's legal challenge as weak. Justice Jane Jago adding the Russian Federation's own national interest is not a matter that can be given weight by this court over the national security interests of the Commonwealth. An hour later, movement at the embassy as a Russian diplomat squatting at the site made a hasty exit.
Sir, what's your name? Where are you going?
Locking that door, but leaving open the potential for other legal challenges.
Australia supports the law. Russia hasn't been real good at upholding the law in recent times.
Russia spending more than $8 million on the site so far will need compensation, a matter still to be resolved. Sarah Tomevska, SBS World News.
Conservative leader Kyriakos Mitsotakis has won Greece's national elections with a clear majority. He's vowing to bring major reforms to the country in his second term as Prime Minister. Mr Mitsotakis' New Democracy Party received more than 40% of the vote, delivering a crushing defeat to his party's main rival, the left-wing Syriza Party. It secured less than 18%. The result is the widest margin for the Conservatives in almost 50 years.
At the Athens headquarters of the New Democracy Party, there were flares, flags and fireworks as Kyriakos Mitsotakis secured another 4 years as Prime Minister.
The citizens have many problems and they demand that we give our full attention to those problems and solve them. Today I'm the Prime Minister of all Greeks and I express the expectations, even of the citizens that did not vote for us.
The 55-year-old former banker promising to boost tourism revenue, create jobs and increase wages. The defeat seeing the leftist Syriza Party lose more than 30 MPs.
It was the most difficult, the most beautiful electoral battle that we've ever fought.
Sunday's election also giving fringe parties on the political left and right a spot in Parliament, including an anti-immigration party called the Spartans. Mitsotakis, the man who helped steer Greece through the coronavirus pandemic, now vowing to rebuild the country's credit rating after slumping into a debt crisis more than a decade ago.
How do I feel with such a Prime Minister? Like every Greek feels. We are very proud that he can lead Greece to the position that it deserves. I think that expresses everyone's thoughts here.
There is no longer right and left. This is a confidence vote in our President and tomorrow's Prime Minister.
It was the second time in 5 weeks Greeks had gone to the polls, the vote on May 21 failing to deliver a single party an absolute majority in the Parliament. Sunday's vote using a system where the leading party was given bonus seats depending on voter support. Mitsotakis' party now holds 158 seats in the 300-seat Parliament. The Prime Minister-elect expected to reveal his cabinet in the coming days. Virginia Langerberg, SBS World News.
Russian airstrikes on villages and towns have killed at least 13 people in rebel-held northwest Syria. Children are among the dead and dozens more have been wounded. Witnesses say a fruit and vegetable market was attacked while it was crowded with shoppers ahead of the Muslim celebration Eid al-Adha. Russian support for Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has remained strong despite fighting in Ukraine. Record crowds from more than 160 countries are making the pilgrimage to Mecca as the Hajj officially begins tonight. This year's crowd influenced by Saudi Arabia's thawing relations with Iran and the lifting of pandemic-era restrictions.
Across the city of Mecca, every hotel room is full. It's estimated 2.5 million Muslims have made the journey. Rizka Sari from Indonesia arrived early, climbing to the cave of Hira, where the Prophet Muhammad is said to have received his first revelation.
To be here is the great experience and the great thing that I can have.
The Hajj is one of the 5 pillars of Islam and must be undertaken by every able-bodied Muslim who can afford it. The record crowds descending after COVID-19 restrictions were abolished. Improved relations with Iran made this bus trip possible. Iran reopened its Saudi embassy earlier this month.
We are 2 friendly Muslim countries, and God willing, the relations will get better in the future.
A further sign of the easing tensions, the first flights from Yemen to Saudi Arabia in 7 years. The airport is controlled by the Saudi-led coalition fighting the Iran-backed Houthi rebels. The influx will boost the economy. By some estimates, Mecca attracted $20 billion tourist dollars in 2018, second only to Dubai. It's why the royal family want to boost numbers with a plan to welcome more than 30 million people by 2030. But managing the crowds in 45-degree heat is a challenge. Medics are dotted throughout and security is tight. The Hajj has seen several stampedes, including a horrific incident in 2015 that killed more than 2,000 people.
أيضا لدينا منظومة كاميرات عالية الدقة موزعة على كافة مشاعر المقدسة والحرم المكي الشريف. يتم رصد الملاحظات وترحيلها للجهات المختصة لمعالجتها في الميدان فورا.
The new technology and high-speed electric trains are part of the plan to expand access to an ancient tradition. Lucy Murray, SBS World News.
The New Zealand Prime Minister's visit to China has got off to a rather embarrassing start. It's been revealed that the Defence Force aircraft ferrying Chris Hipkins was judged so unreliable that a backup plane also flew in reserve. The ghost flight shadowed Mr Hipkins' plane as far as Manila before retiring to Darwin as backup for the return trip home.
First of all, can I acknowledge everybody on the plane? If there are any representatives of the New Zealand Air Force still here, a very big thank you to you for getting us all the way up here to Beijing.
Mr Hipkins is leading a high-powered trade delegation which will meet with President Xi Jinping, Premier Li Qiang and the chairman of the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress, Zhao Lijie. Coming up, alarm in Germany as a far-right political party grows in popularity.